We often talk about the business of professional wrestling, Eric, and I want to point out something that Brandon Thurston pointed out on Twitter that I'll admit was a blind spot for me. And I thought, wow, I got to bring this up to Eric. Here's the tweet. TKO significant relationships across Disney, Netflix, NBCU, Nexstar, Fox, A&E, Paramount, and may or may not have exclusivity terms. But even if they don't contain them in writing, the plaintiff might argue WWE has functionally foreclosed nearly all of the U.S. wrestling television market. There are a few prominent media companies TKO doesn't have deals with: Amazon, Warner Brothers Discovery, Apple. But MLW got its case to move forward when a pre-merger WWE had deals with a lesser variety of U.S. media partners. I'll admit, until Brandon laid that out, I didn't really think about the fact that this kind of almost feels like when two wealthy people are going to get a divorce and one of them strategically goes and meets with all the high-powered lawyers in advance of their spouse having an opportunity to. You want to talk about chess. TKO, man, my gosh, I didn't think about all the different relationships they have. This is crazy.
What are they over on Tubi? They've got content or wherever it is. I mean, their footprint is they're pretty much covering all of the viable bases. Viable meaning for them to reach different audiences with different types of programming. I want to go back to Unreal and before this is over, though, because this is a perfect reason why I want to talk about it. They're not just producing wrestling in the ring. They're producing so many spin-offs, shoulder content, meaning, yes, it's the core characters, it's the core brand, whether it's characters or WWE, whatever. It's the core brand, but presenting it from a different angle, in a different perspective, and telling stories or engaging the audience, depending on the format, in an entirely different way. That makes part of an audience who specifically likes that style of programming. In the case of Unreal, it's more doc follow, as it's referred to in the industry, than it is anything else, but it showcases the characters. I mean, I was listening to, when I watched it last night on Netflix, I was listening to Rhea Ripley, and I'm hearing Rhea Ripley in an entirely different way than I hear from her when I see her in action, right? Different aspect of her character, different look, different feel, different connective point. Because not every potential wrestling fan likes the exact same thing about the product in the ring. I think the internet wrestling community is a good testament to that, right? Everybody's got a different reason why they like pro wrestling, which is why it is so popular and has been since the beginning of freaking television time. Professional wrestling has been a mainstay of any form of television, whether it be, back in the 50s, the first professional wrestling program on network TV was on the Dumont Network in 1953 or 1954. And from that point forward, whether it was leading the way in cable, leading the way in pay-per-view, leading the way in OTT, and now currently leading the way in many respects in streaming. But now what AEW TKO has been able to do, and by the way, we're just talking about WWE content that's spread across all these various platforms. UFC has that same opportunity. They're both under the same umbrella. So TKO is effectively going to have their fingerprints on every means possible to distribute varieties of their core brand to the different audiences and connect on those various touch points or connection points for the audience. It's a brilliant strategy. Brandon Thurston's comment about exclusivity in the agreement, I think I'll be kind here. Theoretically, I guess, particularly based on history, theoretically, yes. But as a result of the lawsuit that you referenced, do you think for a moment that WWE or TKO would structure a contract that would suggest basis for litigation to go back to the monopoly issue? It's not going to happen. There's no exclusivity. Now, here's effectively what happens, though, and this is where it gets way more nuanced. Effectively, what happens is, for example, let's say there was no personal connective tissue in any way, shape, or form between USA and WWE. There was no emotional connection, no history, no loyalty, sheerly decisions based on numbers, right? Certainly no exclusivity. Somebody comes along with a product that is arguably just as good from a production value point of view, from a storytelling point of view, because that's the first thing any television network is actually going to ask is who are your characters and what are your stories? If they don't ask that question, they shouldn't be in that job, but they're going to ask generally. So somebody comes to the table with a competing product that's arguably in those categories equal, maybe even better. Maybe. It's not proven. That person goes to pitch that to USA Network. I can guarantee you the first thing you're going to hear is, and probably from the ad sales division, they're going to speak up first. They always do. Always do when it comes to nut cutting time and decision time. Ad sales is going to say, whoa. We've got all the wrestling we can handle. We can't hardly sell what we've got. Why are we going to dilute what we have, which we're continuing to build up year after year after year? Why would we dilute that to introduce a new product in the same category that's untested? That's not going to happen. So there need not be exclusivity. The natural order of things is going to make it challenging for any new wrestling company or existing wrestling company to find a buyer who's willing to take the risk on more wrestling ad sales content that they're already having, or in some cases have never tried to sell before. So the growth and expansion that Brandon is referring to is absolutely 100% true. The suggestion about maybe not exclusivity, that's clickbait or a passing comment. I like Brandon. I love his research. I appreciate his work, respect the hell out of him. But that's enough of a little nugget of nuanced kind of, rumor mongering, shit stirring that the internet wrestling community lives off of. In reality, it won't happen. There won't be exclusivity in any agreement for all of the seemingly obvious reasons. And the second being that it's not necessary. If you want more wrestling content, are you going to go to the proven producer of wrestling content? Are you going to do this deal with some guy you've never heard of before? I don't know. Enough of that.
Well, listen, I don't know if this is privileged information or not, but do you know Dave Marquez, the guy who's done wrestling in California forever and ever?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, he's been around forever and ever. A lot of our listeners are going to be familiar with his championship wrestling from Hollywood and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Okay. Well, he's got a syndicated network. And so I know I had a conversation with him in Atlanta earlier this year. I was at a Dynamite taping in Atlanta and he was there too. And so we got a chance to catch up beforehand. And I knew that a couple of years ago, he was working with Dave Lagana and he had a whole plan. Like they were going to use my big gold belt and they were going to have a series and it was going to be studio wrestling. They had a partnership with Car Shield and he had a real plan going that I was kind of excited about when Lagana told me about it. So this is my first time seeing Dave since. And I said, hey man, what happened with the CW thing? Cause I remember thinking, hey, they're going to announce this like in the next couple of months and this is going to be a thing. And of course, as we all know, well, that became an NXT property. As the story goes, according to Dave, and I may be butchering this a little bit, so my apologies to him if that's the case. But I think as the story goes, he had a relationship with someone at CW and there was some sort of changeover or management.
Yes.
And when that happened, I think it came across his desk like, hey, if we're going to get in the wrestling business, I know they've got this startup and you guys like them and it's a great relationship, but why don't we just call WWE and see if they've got any programming we could throw? Because that would be easier to sell. And at the last minute, before you know, even though they had a budget and it was locked down and blah, 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 WWE comes in for more money. And as they said, and There Will Be Blood, they drank his milkshake. And there went his deal, his TV deal, and WWE got it. So I'm saying all that to say, I know that those type situations exist where if you're the person responsible for selling those ads and you could try to fight that uphill battle of I've got to educate this new buyer, this new advertiser, on what this company is and what they do and blah, blah, blah. And the first question that anybody who's being pitched that sort of thing is going to say is, you mean like WWE? Because that's the brand in the space. So that was game, set, match for Dave and his CW deal. And I'm pulling for them because I think a lot of him and Lagana, and I hope they do something together really cool one day, but it won't be on the CW. And to point out what you were talking about in reference to the MLW antitrust lawsuit that we know, well, I shouldn't say we know, we've heard is like a $20 million settlement or something in that range. I think they're crazy like a fox. This whole TNA deal, the reason the acquisition has not completely happened, in my opinion, is it's just come out that WWE has first right of refusal if there's another buyer. So they're being strategic. If they pull the lever right now, we may open ourselves up. But if we prove there's another bidder in the marketplace, well, that frees it up. And it's even why I said, well, they're kind of the owner of AAA because they do have a partner there. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about that. It's not like WWE owns AAA lock, stock, and barrel. They have a partner there. So they're being strategic in how all of this works. And I think it's interesting that the two places that we hear TNA might be looking at a new TV deal are A&E, who has a WWE deal, and CW, who has a WWE deal. It's interesting to see how TKO has started to just completely take over this space, especially with regard to advertising dollars, because that's been the uphill battle from day one in wrestling, right?
That's the thing. And it's funny, you talk about your friend Dave, who was, right on the finish line, and somebody went, I don't know, if we want wrestling, why don't we go to those guys over there? Because they make the Mercedes, right?
Yes.
That's the top of the line. That's easier. It's an easier sell.
Yes.
People, especially in the internet wrestling community, and I don't mean to be as disparaging as this is going to sound, but they're just dumb as shit. It's okay to not understand things, but when you work so desperately hard, like Dave Meltzer does, to create the illusion that you're actually knowledgeable about the television business when all you really do is read shit online and maybe read an article in Variety that can capture your 10 seconds of imagination and figure out a way to regurgitate that shit to make yourself sound smart. That's the internet wrestling community as a whole. One of the reasons I like Brandon Thurston is because he provides information. He provides detail. He understands the process and the implications of it more than anybody else that's covered ratings and demos and information before, which is why I respect him. But people think, for example, Joe Blow, the wrestling promoter, he's got a great relationship with the president of this network. They go out and they party together. They eat dinner together. Their wives shop together. They love each other. Doesn't make a fuck. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters are the numbers. And those numbers start and stop. Well, they start with ad sales. If those numbers don't fly, it doesn't matter what that relationship is, because if this guy at the top of the network who's responsible for the revenue and the bottom line is holding on to content because of a personal relationship or even affection or even an appetite for the content himself, if you're holding on to something that's not performing financially, not only is that show going to go, you're going to go. So just, the desire to extend one's professional life in a given situation suggests that it's all about the numbers, and people need to understand, ratings are important to a degree. They're very important. In fact, they're fundamental because they support what I'm suggesting. Ad sales drive everything. Ratings are the only metric that matter in ad sales. Now, take that back. Audience performance is the only thing that matters in ad sales. And yes, there are ways now to track performance and other things outside of a cable platform, for example. Those metrics do matter, but not significantly enough, right? So you're either delivering eyeballs or you're not. If you are, you're in good shape. If you're not, you're vulnerable. So the fact that a buyer is going to make a bet on wrestling, they're going to always make the safe bet. And that's the existing product. That's the well-known brand. I faced the same thing with WCW. When we first, before I brought Hulk, one of the reasons I brought Hulk Hogan in to WCW in '94 is exactly because I was aware of that brick wall that WCW, owned by Turner Broadcasting, not, an unknown entity, we couldn't get traction in the marketplace for the same reason, because WWE was the dominant player, and anybody that wanted to do business in wrestling was going to do business with the dominant player because it's the safer bet. That situation existed for me in 1992, and it exists today, just on a much larger scale.
We are live here, and we're excited to be talking about our topic today, which is going to be Terry Taylor. We're going to get there momentarily, but we're having a lot of fun talking about the business of professional wrestling. And I wanted to briefly talk about this new ESPN opportunity. I don't know that you and I have spent a ton of time talking about this, but with Jeff Jarrett and I, we've had a little bit of a chance to think about this and talk about it. And we've landed on the fact that we believe this will become the biggest, most important deal in WWE history. We took a look at that first Peacock deal that Nick put together. And if this were professional football, I think we'll look back one day and say that was his rookie contract. He's got a big deal financially with the ESPN opportunity. But from a mainstream coverage and acceptance, what this will do for the advertising dollars, because now it's on ESPN, is gigantic. I think it'll also put even more pressure on ticket prices. If you have some of the hottest, most expensive tickets and it's on ESPN, it's going to start to feel like, and you've seen this before, Eric, we would go to a wrestling show and then we would go to a UFC show, and it felt like they were two totally different audiences. And I get that they are, but I'm saying as far like at UFC events, guys and gals get dressed up like they're going out, like they're going to the nightclub or something. It's a totally different experience. And if you've been to like big time college football games, I'm going to talk about football Saturdays in the South. Man, guys and gals get dressed up to go to these sort of things. It's a different thing. And I think that's going to continue to create more advertiser appetite, for lack of a better word.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name's Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California. I came to Save with Conrad because I've heard Conrad talk about how he helps people all the time save money and the best route to go for getting some mortgages and finances done. And having heard so many different testimonials in the past, it made the most sense to go this route. We were in the market for a new house and we wanted to know what we could afford. So we spoke with Steve and then Diane to get through the pre-approval process to see what we could afford. And then once we were able to understand that aspect of it, that was when we were able to shop around for a house to get a mortgage through Save with Conrad. Everybody on the team was great. Everybody really explained everything fully to where it was more in like layman's terms to where I could understand it as someone not in the business or having shopped around for houses too many times. So being able to understand every step of the process and talking with everyone on the team about that was really, really helpful. And it made me feel really confident that I was going the right route. I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. I know that sometimes people look at it and they go, oh, they're based in Alabama, what could they help me with? But I'm out here in California and they were able to square everything away and get things done really quickly, as opposed to sometimes even people out here don't move as quickly as the Save with Conrad team. So everything was really well done, really efficient, and I would definitely recommend Save with Conrad to others. My name is Rajiv. I'm in Sacramento, California, and I was able to get into my dream home with SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 212, non-equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com.